The movie opens with lonely British scholar Alethea while traveling to Istanbul, where she will give a conference about the connection between sciences and myths. When she gets off the plane, a strange-looking glowing man that nobody else notices tries to guide her luggage cart towards what he calls mystery, but when Alethea's colleagues show up, the little man runs away. Alethea tells her friends about what happened, and they jokingly reply she must have seen a jinn. Later during the conference, Alethea sees another strange glowing man among the audience that nobody else can see. When she begins explaining that the old gods became what we know as science and old myths are now metaphors, the weird man calls it rubbish and jumps on her, making her pass out. She wakes up only minutes later and her colleagues take her to her room while the audience offers a round of applause. After the conference is over, Alethea goes downtown to visit antique shops, ignoring her friends' worry and promising she feels fine. In one of these many shops, she finds a curious little blue bottle and decides to buy it instead of anything fancier. The next morning in the hotel, she washes the bottle and finally manages to open it, which releases a djinn that takes up most of the room's space. After trying different languages, Alethea discovers Jinn speaks Greek, and he gets to explain she mustn't fear him. He's beholden to her now and he'll grant her 3 wishes, although she can't ask for more wishes: eternal life, or the end of all suffering. While he talks, Jinn touches all the things around the room, turning on the TV and quickly getting to learn English through its transmissions. Then, Jinn asks Alethea for the wishes of her heart's desires, but Alethea is uncomfortable with the concept and needs to think about it. First, she shares part of her story that she's never told anybody. When she was a kid studying in an all-girls boarding school, she was already a very solitary person. One day, a mysterious supernatural boy began visiting her and keeping her company whenever she was having a hard time, telling her stories in a language only the 2 of them could speak. Not knowing for how long he'd stick around, Alethea began documenting everything about this boy, but the more realism she tried to insert, the more she started to doubt and she began feeling silly. After a while, she burned it all in the school furnace and since that day, she didn't see the boy anymore. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Alethea's breakfast, although she doesn't open the door until Jinn disappears. After putting on the "Don't Disturb" sign on the doorknob, Alethea turns around to find out Jinn has reduced his size and transformed the humble hotel breakfast into something more extravagant. To buy some time until she decides on a wish, Alethea asks how Jinn ended up inside her bottle, and he explains that's his 3rd incarceration because he's always been a fool falling for conversations with women. It all began when Jinn got in a relationship with his cousin Sheba, the queen of the land who was half Jinn and had a thick glade of black hair on her legs. Jinn was her plaything and her confidence, but he still felt free because he was allowed to come and go as he pleased. He hoped he could become her husband one day, but unfortunately, things changed with the arrival of King Solomon, who crossed the deserts just to woo her. Jinn warned Sheba against him, and she promised no mortal could ever conquer her, but eventually she gave in to his charms and even removed her leg hair with wax to spend the night with him after the wedding. However, Solomon could sense Sheba's connection to Jinn, and using his magic skills, he imprisoned him inside a brass bottle and tossed it to a bird that dropped it in the middle of the Red Sea. Jinns don't sleep, so for the first 100 years, he raged against his fate and prayed for freedom to every god under the sun. In the end, he tricked himself and prayed to remain in the bottle, hoping that pretending to yearn for nothing would get rid of the pain. Unfortunately for Jinns, not having wants is the closest thing to death. Now they're back on the topic of what Alethea's heart desires. She explains she's successful and has everything she needs, even if she has no children, parents, or siblings. She used to be married to a man she met at school, but after she had a miscarriage, their relationship broke and they got a divorce. Her husband moved out with a new lover, and to this day, Alethea still keeps a few of his things in a box in the house. Some time ago, her husband had told Alethea that she was incapable of reading feelings, and she agrees. The way her brain is wired makes her smart but also causes her solitude. This is why she likes stories, she can find feelings through them. Still, Alethea doesn't want her husband back, she felt freedom when she divorced. But as a storyteller, she's heard too many stories about Jinn's wishes always having a catch or cautionary tales that don't end happily. Jinn swears he's honorable, but Alethea doesn't listen and wonders if she can make no wishes at all. This causes Jinn to swell up in pain, confirming that wishes must be made to avoid bad consequences, and to prove the point further, Jinn tells Alethea the story of his 2nd incarceration. Fishermen found the bottle inside a fish, but because it was covered in a hard layer, they thought it was a rock and threw it away. The rock changed hands many times until it ended up as part of a wall, where Gultan found it while trying to climb up to spy on Prince Mustafa. Gultan lived as a slave in the palace's courtyard of the concubines and fainted when she opened the bottle to find Jinn. When she woke up, she quickly knew what to wish for. She wanted to be one of Mustafa's concubines. Jinn granted her the wish, and Gultan got to enjoy her new life after hiding the bottle under a heavy floor tile in a secret bathroom. While waiting for the other 2 wishes to come, Jinn wandered the place and learned about humans. That's how his attention fell on Hurrem, who was the Sultan's favorite slave. As a master manipulation, Hurrem sought to protect the throne in favor of her own sons instead of Mustafa, so she kept lots of eyes spying on the prince. Jinn worried Gultan could get caught in some awful political plan and tried to warn her, but she didn't listen and wished to become pregnant with Mustafa's baby. Meanwhile, the Sultan's warriors were worried about their leader becoming too soft for his position and were considering undermining him. Hurrem heard of this and told the Sultan that Mustafa was the one leading the soldiers in order to take the throne of his father, leaving the Sultan with a very hard choice to make. During all this, Gultan never tried to lay low. In fact, she paraded her swollen belly around the palace, certain that she was carrying the next prince. The Sultan heard about this and finally made his choice. He called Mustafa to his tent and killed him without even asking him about his loyalties. As soon as he learned of this, Jin went to see Gultan to warn her they would come for her next and asked for the third wish, but she didn't believe him and run away straight into the assassin's hands. Jin tried to help her, but one of the assassins was a follower of the devil Iblis and had the power to block him. Gultan was thrown into the sea, and while Jin jumped to rescue her, it was already too late. Now, because of a third wish unperformed, Jin was tethered to this world, unable to go to the realm of the Jinn until he could find another master. Alethea finds this story very ironic because it's exactly the kind of cautionary tale she has been talking about, where you're taught wishing has bad consequences. Jin points out once again that making no wishes equals dooming him, and continues his story to back up his reasoning. After Gultan's death, Jin wandered as an invisible force while his bottle stayed hidden under the floor tile. For 100 years, he tried to get people's attention to no avail, until one day, Princes Murad and Ibrahim were able to feel his presence and found the secret bathroom. They almost got to push the floor tile up, but they were interrupted by their mother Kosum, the Sultan's widow. Murad had long hair on his legs, indicating he was Sheba's descendant, so Jin tried to follow him around to get his attention again. Unfortunately, Murad had to take over the throne at 14 and his life became all politics. While an older Murad led armies on the battlefield, Kosum locked adult Ibrahim in a room with a bunch of women, hoping he would produce a male heir and protect the family's place on the throne. Ibrahim loved the idea of spending every day with women, and he chose voluptuous and immense beauties, believing that the more flesh the bigger the pleasure. When Murad returned to the palace after the war, his soul was rotten with blood and trauma. Worried about possible competition, he thought of murdering Ibrahim, but Kosum stopped him just in time by pointing out Ibrahim is too lazy to plan a riot. Still, Kosum couldn't risk losing her babymaker, so she kept Murad drunk at all times and hired storytellers to distract him. Murad hated them and killed them if they didn't escape fast enough, but one day, an old man finally managed to charm him with his tales and became Murad's only friend. When the old man died, Murad got extremely drunk, and in that weak state of mind, Jin got his attention at last. While Murad got to find the abandoned secret bathroom again, unfortunately, he was too weak to even open the door, and afterward, Murad drank until he didn't wake up ever again. Nobody else could sense Jin then, and Alethea is very understanding of how that loneliness feels because she's felt it too. Back to the story, Ibrahim had to be dragged out of his room to be sat on the throne, and he appointed his favorite concubine Sugar Lump as governor of Damascus. Because of this power, Sugar Lump was free to roam, and she eventually found the secret bathroom. Her size broke the tile when she accidentally fell on it, allowing her to find the bottle. Sugar Lump didn't trust Jin when he showed up in front of her since he kept begging for a wish and smelled bad. Thinking he could be a trickster, Sugar Lump wished Jin was back in his bottle at the bottom of the Bosphorus. In Alethea's eyes, this story proves once again that wishing is a bad idea. She thinks she could give Jin to another person more open to the idea, but Jin refuses to get back in the bottle. Next, Alethea makes 3 quick wishes, but they're silly things, like wishing for a sip of her tea. Therefore they don't work, since the wishes need to be a heart's desire. An argument ensues where Jin calls Alethea a coward, and in return, Alethea begins wondering if she should wish they never met. This causes Jin to cry out, begging her to stop as his bottle breaks and a sudden force makes the electronics malfunction for a few seconds. Alethea guesses this has happened before, and Jin proceeds to tell the third and final story. Zephyr was a foundling, married at 12 to a wealthy merchant much older than her. This merchant had 2 older wives that disliked fire, and she felt that everyone in the house, including the servants, was always mocking her. The bottle came to her as a gift from her husband, who saw it fall from a fish the cook was opening. After she was done satisfying him as thanks, Zephyr managed to open the bottle. Jin quickly noticed how bright she was and shared his story with her, prompting her to share in return all the things she had built in her free time. Unfortunately, nobody took her seriously because she was a woman, and that judgment made her feel like a witch with unused power. Her first wish was to ask for as much knowledge as possible, and Jin was glad to grant it by offering Zephyr piles and piles of books. To hide these books from her husband, they put them inside magic bottles. Jin spent all his time with her, teaching her all kinds of sciences and languages, and they eventually fell in love. The more she flourished, the less shy Zephyr became, and she began reveling against her husband. Unfortunately, his cravings for her were an obsession, so when Zephyr had to give herself to her husband, Jin would leave the room and roam the skies to gather new stories he'd tell Zephyr when he came back. Her second wish came when she was unable to finish an ancient mathematical question, thus she asked to perceive the world as genes do. This allowed her to see all the solutions she needed. It also got her pregnant with Jin's baby. He was incredibly happy with her and didn't want to leave for the realm of Jin anymore, so he stopped Zephyr from making the third wish. This angered Zephyr, who then thought Jin was trapping her as her husband did. Whenever a new argument began, Jin would put himself inside a bottle to calm her down, but the last time, Zephyr couldn't take it anymore and wished she could forget she ever met him. Magic allowed her to forget it all in an instant, and Jin once again got stuck inside a bottle. After hearing this last story, Alethea finally knows what to ask for. She thinks she's here to love Jin, and she wishes for him to love her in return, that way their solitudes can be together. Jin accepts and they spend a lovely night together. The next day, Alethea has to go back to her home in London and offers Jin a new bottle so he can travel with her. At the airport, she tries to keep the bottle in her pocket, but the scanner detects it and security makes her put it on the tray. Alethea almost has a breakdown thinking the scanner or the conveyor belt would break the glass, but thankfully the bottle survives the inspection. Once they arrive, Jin has to get used to the big city because all the constant noises and electric waves in the air overwhelm his senses. The two of them begin a peaceful content life together, and whenever Alethea has to work, Jin takes the chance to sneak around to watch humanity's latest inventions, like advanced surgery techniques and the collider. One afternoon, Alethea comes home from work and finds Jin in the basement sleeping, which he isn't supposed to do. His body is slowly becoming ashes because of the effect the city is having on him. Thus Alethea uses her second wish to make him speak again. Then, the two of them have an important conversation where Alethea realizes she shouldn't have forced love between them, so she decides to finally set Jin free. The bottle breaks and Jin returns to his original realm after Alethea falls asleep. The next morning, she puts the few things Jin got to use inside a box and puts it away next to her husband's. 3 years later, Alethea has finished writing and illustrating a book with all of Jin's stories. Suddenly, she's surprised to see Jin show up in front of her. Now that he's healthy again, he can visit her from time to time, helping her chase her solitude away in a more natural way. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.